This is the house that I live in and that I grew up in. I'm an architect. I guess you were hoping for a masterpiece. This house is not that. It's a 2-storey 1950s Queenslander, and it works perfectly well for the tropics. It has big eaves. They keep out the sun and the rain, large windows that let the breezes in and let you connect to the outside. It's well-sited and well-oriented for its place. It is perfectly sufficient for our family of 4. It is enough. This house is just up the road from me in a suburb that is full to the brim with slab-on-ground concrete block houses that have big side fences, small overhangs, small windows that don't connect to the outside, that are air-conditioned. And for me, that have no joy or beauty that is North Queensland. They also have an anonymity and a sameness that doesn't make you want to go for an evening walk in your suburb. This is our weekender, another architectural masterpiece. In its 54 square metres, we have learnt a lot. It is perfectly sufficient. It has a place to sleep, a place to cook, a place to wash, a place to sit, and a place to go to the toilet. Thanks, David. We have learned a lot from living in this shed because when we are in it, we are much better behaved and nicer to each other. We understand our personal interactions and we watch our personal use of space. We are more community-minded and we pay respect to one another. I think in Australia, we are losing our connection to be able to adapt to new living environments. And I think left to our own devices, we create houses that are very large with lots of little rooms where we separate ourselves from each other and from our families. And in them, we do behaviours that are unproductive, bad for ourselves, bad for others, and bad for society. I think we're losing our balance and we need to get it back. But there is a solution. And I think the solution sits at the nexus of good architectural tropical design and environmental psychology. And I call this idea the least house necessary, or less walls, more life. Less physical, psychological, emotional walls, and more life. The least house necessary for me is about challenging what you really need to live comfortably in the tropics. Over the last few years, we have successfully run more than 250 people in our local area through the Least House Necessary design workshop, and slowly we're beginning to influence and show people in North Queensland how you can design simple solutions that work for the tropics. How did I get here? Well, I spent a lot of time living in old houses, living on farms, living out the bush, and living with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And from that, I've realised that somehow we have forgotten what has come before in Australia, and we're not taking note of the existing Indigenous architecture. This is a repertoire from the 1930s from Northern Australia. It just shows a small number of shelter types, but what's important is to note that people used local resources. They built dwellings that responded to the climate, to the location, to the family needs at the time. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Let's look at a non-Indigenous example from the 1930s. This is a housing memory that many of us in North Queensland have, a 1930s workers' cottage. I think in the new houses that we are building, we have forgotten how to control light and shade and breezes in a beautiful way. But it's not complex science, and I will give you some tips on the things that we ought to bring back into the new houses that we're building. We need to control sunlight, we need to keep out the rain, we need to create deep shade, we need to capture and direct breezes, create material and textural variety rather than blandness, and support spatial flexibility so we can create spaces that can be used for multiple purposes. But you'll say to me, Shaneen, we don't live in 1930, and we're not camping all the time. And you're right. So how do we do this in our contemporary dwellings? How do we do this when the cost of materials and resources is so high now? Well, there is an answer that I'm going to show you, but before I do that, I want to illustrate to you the drivers for housing in Northern Australia at the moment. Now, this is not meant to make you feel guilty. It makes me feel guilty when I watch it. What it's meant to do is to highlight to ourselves what's really going on. So we're terrified of cyclones and large storms. And we're terrified of someone erasing our house and losing our possessions. And so we build ourselves concrete block bunkers to live in, and we prepare for the worst. We're terrified of these beautiful carpet pythons and mosquitoes and fantastic spiders, even though they're actually not that great a threat to ourselves. So we disconnect ourselves from the outside and we shut our houses down and we prepare for the worst. We like to protect our data and our precious objects and our children. And we don't like people inspecting our behaviour too closely behind closed doors. So we keep out our family and we keep out our community. We love living in North Queensland, we love going to the beach, we love camping, and thankfully for us, it's only 20 minutes up the road. So it's really convenient. So we don't have to make a beautiful urban environment in our backyard because we can just go up the road. We're a bit apathetic about our local built environment. We love our children to have creative play, but our yards are very small and they are very messy, so we just plug them into technology where they can play in virtual worlds and they don't have to use their manners. And we like an easy life that's low maintenance. We're time poor and we don't have time to spend maintaining houses and fixing them up. So we want houses that are durable, that'll last a long time, that we don't have to do much to. And above all, we need affordable housing because the cost of electricity is increasing and the cost of building is going through the roof. So we need houses that don't cost too much. So what are the real drivers for housing in Northern Australia? Fear, control, convenience, and cost. What would a house in far north Queensland look like if the drivers were joy, awareness, commitment, and affordability? Well, I'm going to show you a little project that we're working on. It's not an architectural masterpiece, but it's a sensible solution for the tropics that's quite affordable. A client came to us with a small brick house in Cairns that was built in 1970 and said, "We've just been to your workshop, can you make it work for us? It doesn't work for where we live, it's really hot." So this client has a big backyard and they love to spend time in the yard, but this house doesn't enable it. So we did an analysis of the house. Interestingly, in 1970, three bedrooms was 128 square metres and it had 9% window area. What we did, if you look at the slide on the left, this was where the bedrooms were in the orange, all blocking the southeasterly breeze. So we gutted the house, ripped out the back wall, opened up the house to the backyard, captured the southeasterly breezes, put the bedrooms on the north, where people are not looking to the street anyway. We also pulled the wet areas out of the main house and put them separate to the house but connected. And so now the family has a house that connects to the garden, that works for the tropics, that captures the southeasterly breezes, and it hasn't cost very much. Here is a video that captures it. That's the existing dwelling. There are the existing walls. Here's the new floor plate and the new deck, which was about 30 square metres, and the new bedrooms. And this is the new elevation in the rear. So there's the old at the bottom and the new at the top. The other thing that's really interesting about this house, or what made me realise is happening, is that our houses in our new suburbs are getting bigger and our lots are getting smaller. So the house we just looked at, built in 1970, was about 170 square metres when we'd added the veranda, and it sits on a 700 square metre lot, so there's still room for a decent garden. The houses in the new suburbs near where I live, like the one I showed you in the beginning, the houses are between 230 and 260 square metres, and the lots are 500 square metres in size. So we're losing our backyards and our ability to create greenery and softness and temperature reduction in our new suburbs. So do we need more house? I would say to you that we don't. We don't need more bedrooms and more bathrooms and more media rooms and things that separate ourselves off from one another and from our community. What we need are stairs that end in ferns so you could put your toes into the garden. We need a chair on a veranda where we can see and hear the honey eaters. We need another table in the garden in the shade so we can have a cup of tea with friends or share a story. And we need outdoor places to play that are fun so that our children can care for our environment, can look after it, and we can share it with others. Let me ask you, which would you prefer? I know I would prefer less walls and more life. Thank you.